As established in the previous video lectures, communication is dynamic and it encompasses a wide range of elements, factors, and even purposes. But did you know that only 7% of the time we use words to communicate? It was Albert Mehrabian, a researcher of body language, who first broke down the components of a face-to-face conversation. He found that communication is 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and 7% words only. In this lecture, we will learn all about verbal and nonverbal communication. Specifically, we will talk about the following: verbal communication, aspects and characteristics of an effective voice, factors influencing voice, things to consider in verbal communication, nonverbal communication, categories and types of nonverbal communication, and examples of nonverbal communication. What is verbal communication? Perhaps the more obvious, common, and more understood mode of communication is verbal communication. This simply means using words to relay a message. The message is mostly sent through speech or with the use of our voice. An example of this is any oral conversations you engage in with your family and friends, face to face, on the phone, or even virtually. Because we use our voice to communicate verbally, there are important aspects we have to consider. The volume. This refers to the loudness or softness of voice. Pitch refers to how high or how low your voice is. Rate refers to how fast or how slow words are coming out of your mouth. Quality refers to how well you project your voice. Pauses refer to small necessary breaks in between phrases and sentences. Emphasis refers to putting stress on important words or phrases. And variety, which refers to the variation of words and phrases that you use. Here are some characteristics of an effective voice. An effective voice must be audible, pleasant, fluent, and flexible. Voice audibility refers to the quality of being heard or understood. Is your voice loud enough to be heard, or is it too soft to be understood? For example, a teacher uses a louder than normal voice inside the classroom during discussions so the students who are seated at the back could still hear him or her. What makes a voice pleasant, however, is subject to the listener's taste and personal preferences. Notice how television and radio hosts project their voice so to sound more pleasant. Fluency refers to the ability to deliver speech quickly and easily in a particular language with accuracy in proper expression. It is usually the impression that you can speak and understand a language very well or at an advanced level. However, effective communicators know when and how to adapt their voices and communication skills to any verbal communicative situation. This characteristic of effective voice usage is what we refer to as flexibility. When engaging in verbal communication, you also need to consider the following: appropriateness of the language used to the environment or occasion. Is it formal or informal? Brevity or being more direct with words that you use. An effective speaker avoids fillers and unnecessary expressions like like, etc. Clarity or the ability to clearly state your message and express your ideas and feelings. Ethics or carefully choosing words in consideration of gender, roles, ethnicity, preferences, and status of the person or people you're talking to. Vividness or using words that vividly or creatively describe things or feelings to add color and spice to communication. pronunciation, or the ability to combine vowels, consonants, syllables, and accents to emphasize a word, idea, or thought. Articulation, or the process of forming meaningful oral symbols through the manipulation of articulators such as the tongue, soft and hard palates, teeth, gums, lips, and jaws. And lastly, dialects. Do you consider differences in language when you speak with other people? The verbal message is an essential part of communication, but the way we communicate non-verbally is equally and sometimes more important. It is not what we say, but how we say it that often matters most, especially when we communicate feelings and attitudes. If someone's words do not match their nonverbal behaviors, it's not very convincing. We often mistrust the words and tend to believe the nonverbal cues instead. According to Vaughan and Hogg in 1998, nonverbal communication refers to an interaction where behavior is used to convey and represent meanings. It is also described as the transfer of meaningful information from one person to another by means other than written or spoken language. There are three main categories of nonverbal communication. The first one is what we refer to as sign language. This includes all codes in which numbers, words, and punctuation signs have been replaced by gestures. Examples include the American Sign Language and the Filipino Sign Language. Action language refers to the use of body movements as signals for communication. For example, when you scratch your head when you feel confused, or when you cover your face when you feel embarrassed or ashamed. Another category of nonverbal communication involves all intentional and non-intentional display of materials or things. This is what we refer to as object language. For example, when people tend to display money or to buy and wear branded apparel to express affluence. There are other types of nonverbal communication. First one is kinesics. This refers to the study of hand, arm, body, and face movements as a form of communication. This is probably the most well-known type of nonverbal communication. An example is the eye contact you make and your facial expressions while talking to someone. Haptics refers to the study of communication through touch. Holding hands, hugging, kissing, or giving your friend a tap on the back when he or she is feeling lonely are examples of haptics. Proxemics. This refers to the study of how space and distance influence communication. For example, giving up your personal space in crowded public transportation just to get to school on time. Chronemics. This refers to the study of how time affects communication. For example, people may have a lot to say about your personality when you're always late for school or work. And lastly, vocalics. This refers to the vocalized but not verbal aspects of nonverbal communication, or what we call paralanguage. For example, girls tend to use a higher than normal pitch, or boys tend to use a lower than normal pitch when speaking with their crushes. For one to be considered an effective communicator, a person needs to boost his or her verbal expressions with nonverbal ones. Nonverbal communication can clarify even the most difficult message. Sometimes, nonverbal cues can be more meaningful than the words themselves. Although verbal communication is easier to understand, nonverbal communication is important not only to comprehend the message itself, but also the feelings behind it. More importantly, A good command of nonverbal cues reveals a lot about you as a communicator and how you can relate to other people. As John C. Maxwell said, people may hear your words, but they feel your attitude.